Amen.
I thank God for being here. Y'all can sit down. Y'all can sit down. Thank God for being here on today. Thank God just for allowing me to come here. I've been well trained because I had to get up around 6 o'clock in the morning so I can get to work. So 9 o'clock is all right for me. So I'm awake right now. So I'm usually awake around this time. So I just want to know if y'all are awake on this morning.
All right.
Yes. Has everybody come expecting to receive something from God? See, I understand we might be here in a hotel setting, but I understand that the Bible also declares that where there are 2 or 3 gathered in my name, touching and agreeing. He said, there I'll be in the midst. So I understand I can count, and USM taught me well. I see more than 2 or 3. So the only thing we need now is some agreement in the place, and the Spirit can have His way. So I'm grateful to be here on today. The last time I was here, we talked about, we preached from Psalms 133 about how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to gather in unity. I believe y'all still united on today. I still see some of the same faces. I see some new faces. I'm glad to see everybody on today. The only difference is I got a beard now and I don't have as much hair. But, and I got a wife now, so yeah, we there right now. So I thank God just for being here. When Brother Marcus asked me to come, I didn't hesitate. I accepted the call because no matter where the gospel needs to be shared, I don't mind going to share it. And so God is just looking for some people in this season who are going to be willing. I asked him, I said, what's your theme? And he said, I'm not sure about that, but I find out. He said, but just preach what God gives you. So I began to pray at that moment. Amen. And God led me to Isaiah, the 6th chapter. But then I got here this morning, and I looked at y'all program. I said, look at that. I said, it all lined up. I said, look at that. So I see what your theme is. I see what your scripture is. And so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna talk with both. I'm familiar with Paul. Paul is he's a good person to talk about on today. Like I did a week revival up in Branch, Mississippi, in Leesburg 2 weeks ago, and talked a little bit about Paul. But Paul is an important figure in the Bible because Paul declared that he was the chief among sinners. A lot of people don't like to admit that they're not perfect. Watch your toes on this morning. A lot of people don't like to admit that we did wrong, but if you begin just to take inventory of your life, it ain't what you've done that's the reason that you're still here, but because of grace, you're still here on today. So I understand, even on last night, you might have done some things wrong. I ain't talking to you. I done some things wrong on yesterday. But thanks be to God that He does not hold us to a standard. He does not judge us based off what we've done, because a lot of us wouldn't be here. But because His grace, we're still here on today. So I thank God for that. But if you have Bibles, or if you have a cell phone, look up Isaiah, the 6th chapter. I'm going to start around verse number 8. I'm going to start at verse number 8. If y'all don't say amen this morning, I'll be up here a little bit longer. So we're going to depend on the people at the table this morning. Isaiah, the 6th chapter, 8th verse. It says, also I heard the voice of the Lord. He was saying, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Then I said, here am I, send me.
All right.
Is that good enough for y'all on this morning? Here am I, send me. But then if you look at in 1 Corinthians 3 and 9, Paul is talking to the church at Corinth, and he begins to say, for we're God's fellow workers. You're God's field. You're God's building. I want to talk to you this morning. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, do your part.
Do your part.
Do your part.
Do your part.
All right, you can be seated on it.
All right.
See, usually I would talk to you, but this This is for your neighbor. See, a lot of us sometimes. So if it started to hit you, say that's for you. So look at your neighbor and say that's for you. And so see, the thing is, a lot of us sometimes, it's easy to get discouraged along life's way. It's easy for us to say, we don't want to do something. I want to tell you that sometimes you're going to have to go to some meetings and some conferences alone. Sometimes you're going to be the only one who's trying to do the fundraisers and the only one showing up and being faithful. But don't worry about what everybody else is doing. You just do your part. See, listen here. I began to look, and this guy by the name of Frank Sonnenberg, he said, even though the world is large, one person can still make a world of difference. I understand that a lot of us wants to go out and save the world, but all you got to do is do your part. Just start with one, and then God will begin to give you the increase. If you begin to look in Corinth, see, Paul begins to talk to the church here that's tore up from the floor. Corinth had some problems. They had some division. They had some quarreling going on in the church. People disrupting service. The women didn't know how to act. I ain't talking to y'all on this morning. But Paul was just telling them, look, don't be boastful in your gift. He said, but just do what you can. Why you can. Now, don't worry about who your leader is. Don't worry about following Apollos or following me. Don't worry about following Jesus, but just do your part. Do what you can while you can. And so he begins to break this down to them. He said, I didn't come to you as a spiritual people, but because you're still carnal in spirit. He said, but I was still feeding you milk because you weren't ready for meat yet. See, a lot of people think they're ready for different things, but God is saying, just do what you can. Right now, he said, then I provide you with the increase. See, Paul understood this, and Paul began to tell them that we all are laborers in this field. If you begin to look at different interpretations, he said, well, co-workers. Sometimes your co-worker at work don't do their part, right? That's right. A lot of people in your organization don't do their part. Don't look at them too fast. Don't begin to look around. See, sometimes you try to call people and they don't never answer their phone. Sometimes you're looking for people and you're wondering where they at, but they ain't never on time. And sometimes you're looking for people to do their part, but you're worried about what everybody else is doing, but God is just saying, do your part. So I can't worry about what everybody else is doing, but in order for me to be who God has called for me to be, I got to do my part. I got to do what I can to help in the field on today. So here we are. We begin to talk, and if you begin to do your part, Isaiah, if we skip back over to Isaiah, we begin to find a Judah in Jerusalem who's in a critical place in their life. They're at a critical point. There's some things going on in Judah. There's corruption. There's people who are not listening to God. And you believe to find, if you look in Hattiesburg, we see that right now. If you begin to look across Mississippi, we see that right now. It looks similar to what we see here in the Bible because things don't change. See, sometimes things just remain the same. Right. But sometimes we all find ourselves, and what I had to figure out in college is sometimes the teacher will give group projects. I never liked group projects. See, a lot of people didn't like group projects. See, the reason why is because of this. Because I had to find this out. A lot of times you doing group projects, but there's never no group work going on. So that's a problem with that because I understood that everybody was going to get a grade based on the presentation, and sometimes you would go to the teachers, and I had to figure out what was going on because the teacher would just say, do your part. And they said everything else will work out. I had to figure out what they were talking about. I said, what? So they're not going to correct the person who's not doing their part. But I found something out in college because the reason why they would say do your part is because there was a part at the end of the project where you got to be able to grade your partner. And so sometimes in life, see, if you just do what you can, you'll end up getting your best grade. See, God is going to grade the other people. See, you just worry about yourself and you'll get a reward at the end of this. Paul was telling them that. He said, look, you're going to get your reward at the end. Just do what you can. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. But Isaiah begins to talk, and Isaiah says that in the year that King Uzziah died.
Yeah, yeah.
He begins to have an encounter with the Lord. Watch this. His first point is we're facing critical times. Watch this. We're at a point right now where God is trying to do some things. We're at a point right now where things are critical, but he's looking for some people just to do their part. See, you've been crying, you've been worried because you lost some things, but sometimes God had to allow you to lose some things so you can begin to have an encounter with him. See, here it is. He said, in the year that King Uzziah died. Why did he tell me this? Because it was important that King Uzziah died. Because Uzziah was a person who believed in the Lord. He believed in God. He followed the Lord. He implemented all his statutes. But here it is that King Uzziah got ahead of himself. He got too prideful. Oh, y'all know some people like that, don't you? You know some people who get too big for their britches. Your grandmama used to tell you that all the time. They say, you're getting too big for your britches. And so he gets to a place where he thought he can step in the role of a priest. And so he steps into the temple. They say, don't go in there, Uzziah, but he did it anyway. And he was struck down with leprosy. So sometimes we get to a point where we're worried about everybody else, but God said, look, I got to get you to a place where you lose some things in order for me to do some things in your life. Right. And so it says that King Uzziah, he was a king ever since he was 16. And he served for about 52 years. And so here he is. It said, in the year that King Uzziah died, so it was important because Isaiah was believed to be the cousin of Uzziah. And so I understand that sometimes it's hard to lose some things. Nobody ever wants to lose anything. Nobody ever wants to get to the point where we are losing some things in our life. But sometimes God says you got to let your relationships go. You got to let those things that's hindering you go in order for me to elevate you to a new level. See, I can't get to what God wants for me to be because I'm still holding on to past junk. Y'all get that when y'all get home. In order for me to elevate to a new level, I got to do my part and I got to let the things go that God is telling me to let go. So he begins to say, in the year that King Uzziah died, he said, here it is that Isaiah is a counselor. He's a counselor to Uzziah. And so God's saying, Isaiah, I don't want you to be a politician anymore, but I want you to be a prophet for me. So sometimes we get caught up in titles. Sometimes we get caught up in what we are and what people call us and what we go by. But God is saying, let that stuff go. And in order for you to be who I call for you to be, you got to let those things go in your life. I understand we got all kinds of different titles in the organization, but that means nothing without God.
That's right.
See, if you ever get ahead of yourself, you'll find yourself getting ahead of God. So Uzziah, here it is. It said that he gets to a place, and God had to get to Isaiah to a place, and he said, what happens now? What do I do now? So he would have never have gone to the temple if Uzziah had not have died. So God is saying, I need you in a place where I can get into an encounter with you. I need to get you into a place where I can deal with you. I need to get you into a place where I can elevate you on today. So he begins to get in this place because Uzziah died on today. He said, so what do I do now? So what do I do? So he went to the church to get an answer. So a lot of people go to different things. You want to go to friends and family. They ain't never helped you in your life. You want to talk to people who going to gossip about you. You want to talk to people who don't even have a solution. You want to turn to the right and then turn to the left. But in the last resort, you get to God. See, God needs to be the first in the equation.
That's right. That's right.
In order for him to deal with you, in order for you to get some answers. And so he didn't go to the people of the nation. He went to God. And he went to the church in order to have a face-to-face encounter with the king. So God was saying, look, I understand that Uzziah died, but there's still somebody who sits higher on the throne. There's still somebody in place who's still in control. See, I understand you had some death in your family. I understand you lost some relationship. I understand you lost some money in this year. I understand you lost some things in this year. You lost some physical things. You lost some possession. But God is saying, I'm getting you to a place where you can realize that I'm still in control. And when you realize that, you can do your part. And so here it is. If you begin to think about it, it said this year alone, I was looking at a news story the other day. They said this year alone, there's been more mass shooting than they have been days. 297 as of August 31st, I believe that we're a critical point in this nation.
All right.
If you begin to think about it, you got more than 553,000 people that's homeless every night. I believe that we're at a critical point in this nation. If you 12.3% of people living in poverty, we're at a critical place where God needs to do something in this nation. See, I don't care who's in the White House. I don't care who's in the Capitol. I don't care who's in City Hall, but it starts from the White House all the way to your house. Right. You got to have an encounter with God. See, I understand that my help does not come from the president. My help does not come from who sits up here.
That's right.
But the Bible tells me that my help comes from the Lord. See, if we're dependent on man, they'll always fail you. But I know a man who sits closer than a brother. I know a man who sits high and looks low. I know a man who never sleeps nor does he slumber. I know a man on today. And if you do your part, he'll elevate you higher than you ever been elevated before. It's the best promotion that you can ever have. It's the best job status you can ever have. It's the best job you can ever have in the world if you just do your part. So you begin to think about this. Even if you begin to go to prison and you see more black males in prison than you see in household, I believe that we're at a critical point. You begin to see 2.3 million people in jail and prisons. I believe that we're at a critical point in our nation where somebody has to stand up and do something. So God had to get Isaiah to a place, not as a politician, but to a place where he could see what was wrong with the nation. He had to get him to a place where he can see physically what was going on with Judah. And he said, Lord, look here. He said, Isaiah, when you come into encounter with me, you'll never be the same again. So he begins to have this encounter. And so then the second point, it begins with you. What is it? It is change. Change begins with you. Michael Jackson said it. I don't like to quote him too much, but he said, if you begin to look in the mirror, he said the change begins with you. He said, if it starts with the man in the mirror, see, a lot of people want to look at everybody else's mirror. You want to start on everybody else's porch. You want to start at everybody else's house. Somebody help me out on this morning. You want to start out at everybody else's porch. But if you start with yourself, if you start with the person that you look at every morning, I believe that we can have some great change that you can just do. Yes. Somebody say, do your part. Do your part. So it begins with you. So here it is that he went to a place that he was used to going, but he begins to have a different encounter because he lost Uzziah. And so I believe that a lot of people go to church, but that does not mean I've had an encounter with God. Oh, I appreciate myself on today. Just because you go to the Bible study does not mean you've had an encounter with God. Just because you sing in the choir does not mean you've had an encounter with God. Just because you pray every day like you say you do, it does not mean you've had an encounter with God. But you know when you had an encounter with God that you can never be the same again. See, I can preach myself on today. Because I know I got some flaws. I know I don't do everything right. But when you've had an encounter, you never be the same again. What are you talking about? People ought to be able to see the difference in you. People ought to be able to see that you don't walk the same, you don't talk the same, you don't do the same thing. There ought to be a physical change. People ought to be able to see it in you. See, I'm reminded when Jacob had an encounter with the Lord, it said that he couldn't even walk the same anymore. It said the Lord changed his name to Israel because he said he wrestled with the Lord. And so he couldn't, the physical change was on him because he couldn't walk the same because the angel touched the socket of his hip. And so here it is. Sometimes if you've been in an encounter with people, I ought to know that you already had an encounter with the Lord. So he begins to talk. Isaiah begins to see something here. Watch this. I paint the picture for you. If you don't have your Bible, I begin to paint the picture. It says that he went to the temple. He begins to see the Lord. He said he begins to see God say high up on the throne. Yes, right. He begins to see him. He said his robe filled the temple. His train of the Lord. He just filled the temple. He begins to see it. And if you ever seen somebody coming down the aisle at a wedding, you know what a train is. And so he said it filled the temple. But then there was some seraphims in there. There's the high angels. They begin to praise the Lord. They say, holy, holy, holy. So It began to set this atmosphere for Isaiah because he was going to have an encounter where he could not be the same again. So he begins to say that the seraphim, he began to see them. He said they had 2 wings to cover their face, 2 to cover their feet, and then they had 2 to fly. He said, I don't know what I'm seeing. He said, but I had an encounter. He began to give it from his perspective. See, a lot of people want to explain from your somebody else's perspective, but explain from your perspective. Say, I'm not talking about anybody else, but I'm talking about when you had an encounter with the Lord. Stop worried about everybody else. Stop worried about who's saved and who's not saved. Stop worried about what everybody else is doing and what they're not doing. And start with yourself. And you begin to know that I can't see what everybody else is doing. See, somebody once told me that when you focus on your own stuff, you can't see what everybody else is doing. Say this woman, she went to the pastor before and said she began to say, you know, these people, they're gossiping, they're doing this and that. He said, look, carry this water around the church. He said, walk around the church. And he said, just focus on the water and make sure you don't drop in it. He said she walked around the church and he said, did you drop in it? She said, no. He said, but did you see what everybody else is doing? She said, no, why you asked me that? I was focused on my water. Right. He said, when you're focusing on what you're doing, you can't see what everybody else is doing. So a lot of people need to focus on what's in their cup. A lot of people need to focus on what God has commissioned you to do, what God has charged you to do. You need to focus on your own stuff, and then you can't worry about what everybody else is doing. You won't know who attended meetings and who not. You won't know who's doing their work. You won't know who's fundraising and not if you begin to focus on what you're supposed to be doing. See, in order for you to be better, focus on your own stuff. Labor in this field. And see, he told me that the harvest is plentiful, but the labors are few. So if you begin to focus on what he's giving you to do, then you won't be able to know who else is working in the field. See, I know it's a lot of people that call themselves preachers and Christians and all these other titles that you want to give them, elders and bishops, wherever they want to go by. But if you begin to focus on your own self, I don't know what they're doing, but I know what God has commissioned me and what he's ordained for me to do. So Isaiah begins to say after he's had this encounter, he said, look, woe is me. Because he realized that, well, maybe I wasn't doing all of my Christian duty. Maybe I wasn't doing everything that I was supposed to do. Maybe everything that I thought I was doing, it was not good enough. He said, woe is me. He said, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of people with unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. See, watch this. And so he begins to be convicted because he begins to see that the things that he thought he was doing, he realized that he should have been convicted himself. See, there's a lot of people who have not been convicted, but then they're trying to tell everybody else what to do. So when you're convicted, see, some things ought to change. When you're convicted, some things you can't operate in the same manner anymore. So he begins to know that I'm unclean myself. But not only that, but also I dwell in the midst of people with unclean lips. See, if you begin to go in the Bible, he said, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. Why did he say that? Because it said the priests were doing the same thing the people were doing. Uh-oh, I stepped on somebody's toe. It said the priests were operating the same manner as the people. And so a lot of us are supposed to be helping people, but then we're operating in the same manner as them. But if you begin to change, you'll never be the same again once you had this encounter. See, Matthew 12 and 34 tells me that out of the abundance of the heart, it said that the mouth speaks. So for out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So that's what it tells me. See, the things that in your heart will come out sooner or later. See, the things that's in your heart is going to speak up sooner rather than later. See, I was listening to a coworker yesterday. She said, if you want to know how people really are, just take them to a baby, and then the baby will tell you how people are. See, baby will tell you people's spirit. The baby will tell you how people operate. See, you wonder why kids acting crazy is because you got bad spirits around. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. See, sooner or later, your real intention is going to come out sooner or later. Who you are is going to have to show up sooner or later. It's going to show up. See, I can put on an act in front of people, but sooner or later, what's in my heart, what's in my soul has to come up on the outside. See, there's a lot of people who call themselves Christian, but then the first moment somebody step on their toes, they want to cuss. I ain't talking to y'all. That ain't about y'all. Look out, neighbor. People do things to you, you want to act the same way that they act. See, if you're called to be better, I know I got to behave myself in a different way. Everybody is not going to be on my side. Everybody is not going to pat me on my back. Everybody that smiles in my face is not going to mean it for my good. Everybody who said that you did a good job, they're going to turn around and stab you in your back. See, I understand that what's on the inside of me, it got to show up on the outside. See, God is looking for some people, even when people do you wrong, even when people don't accept you, He's looking for some people who are going to show some godly love. Some people who are going to show some brotherly love on today. That's who God is looking for. But then, Isaiah had to begin to question him, say, look, he said, look, I got to ask myself, am I really operating in my purpose? Am I really fulfilling what God has told me to do? Am I really fulfilling my potential? See, if you begin to ask yourself that question, when you begin to take inventory, I believe we all can find that we have not done nearly as much as we could. See, there's a lot of people who think they've done enough, but really it's not enough. All right. See, you've been focusing on what everybody else is doing. You've been focusing on what everybody else hasn't been doing, and you've been missing out on what God has told you to do. You'll catch it when you get home. Just let it marinate on today. Are you really fulfilling the purpose that God has given to you? Are you really fulfilling your potential on today? See, think about Paul on today. Paul begins to think about, have I really been doing what God has told me to do? But when he got to the end of his race, he said, look, I know this. I fought a good fight. He said, I finished my course. Now waiting for me is the crown of righteousness. So what he was telling me is that I know I've done all I can do. See, I couldn't say that when I was persecuting Christians. I couldn't say that at some points. But now, at the end of my life, I know I've done all I can. See, people are only going to remember you by what you've done. See, Maya Angelou told us that. She said, people may forget what you say, they may forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That's right. And so I understand that sometimes in life, everybody may not congratulate you. Everybody may not pat you on the back. Right. And this is what Paul was saying here in Corinth. He said, but don't worry about that, because some are waterers and some are planters. See, you may be operating in a job that ain't even supposed to be yours. See, some people are operating in purposes that God has not intended for you to operate in. See, God has called some people to be preachers, but you want to be a deacon. Everybody wants to be in the choir, but God ain't called you to sing. Neighbor. Can't hit the note if it was in front of you, but everybody's trying to sing. See, people are operating in things that God has not ordained for them to do. God begins to tell Jeremiah in the first chapter, he begins to tell him, he said, before you in your womb, he said, I knew you, I formed you, I made you a prophet unto the nation. See, God, before he formed you, he already knew what you were going to be. See, it's up to you to figure out what your purpose is. It's up to you to figure out what God is trying to tell you to do on today. We go to Romans 8, he begins to tell me that for those who are predestinated, these are also called, and these who are called are also justified, and these who are justified are also glorified. And so he said, then what shall we say to these things? That if God is for me, y'all know the scripture, he said, then who can be against me? So I understand that I may go out to a world that's going to slap me in my face and spit in my face when I try to do good. See, Paul even told you that. He said, when I desire to do good, evil is always present. So I understand everybody's not going to want to hear me. I understand everybody's not going to congratulate me. But I understand that as long as I got Jesus on my side, as long as I have God on my side, as long as I'm operating in my purpose, I don't have to worry about vainglory. I don't have to worry about being puffed up and lifted up. But I don't have to worry about being put on a pedestal. But as long as God has my back, as long as I can get the reward at the end, that makes the mission worth it on today. Somebody say, do your part. Do your part. And so thirdly, he said you have to change. And so he understood, I got some stuff wrong with me on today. I understand that before I can go out in the mission field, I understand before I can do what God has called for me to do, I got to change the stuff that's wrong with me. See, some people are trying to be missionary, but you got bad attitudes you need to change on today. Some people are trying to do things, and God is saying you got to change what's wrong with you first before I can fully utilize you on today. See, there's some tools on the inside of you that God is trying to cultivate, that God is trying to harvest, and God is trying to use, but you still are in the babe stages on today. Somebody say you got to move from milk on today, and you got to get to some meat. See, there's some things. See, the reason why the baby cannot stay on milk is because he has to fully develop. There's some things in meat that he finds that he can't find in milk. See, y'all get that when you get home. See, there's some protein, there's some vitamins, some things that's in meat that he cannot get in milk.
That's right.
So in order for him to develop strong and healthy bones, in order for him to be big and strong, he has to begin to go to meat on today.
All right.
See, some people are laboring on today, and you still want to get the glory on today, but God is saying, don't worry about what people say. Just do what I call for you to do. Just labor in my field. Just begin to work and be builders on today. Paul told them, he said there's a master builder who's already laid the foundation. See, that's one thing I know about a foundation, that if you build on a solid foundation, that when things come in my life, see, and the storms may blow and the winds may blow and the rain may fall, but when I'm built on a solid foundation, that when those things come, because I'm steadfast and because I'm unmovable, it can't blow down on today. Matthew begins to declare that there was a man who built his house on a solid rock. There was a man who built his house on sandy ground. He said, but when the winds came, he said the man who built his house on a solid foundation, he said the wind beat and the wave beat against the house, but it still stood. He said, but the one who was on the sandy or rocky ground, he said that when it came, it said that it surely fell down. See, that's somebody who's been built on the wrong foundations on today. And God has to rebuild you from the foundation up in order for you to stand on today. See, I understand in order for this hotel to stand, in order for the things in my life to stand, it has to be built on a solid foundation. And so I know some tornadoes may come and it may knock some things down. It may knock down the physical building, but the foundation will still stand. See, we had 2 tornadoes and I went around and I saw some houses that were blown down, but the foundation was still standing. See, there's something about a foundation. Even though the physical building may fall, you can still build back on that foundation. If it's a good foundation, God can do some building on today. All he needs is for you to do your part. Be a good co-worker on today. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing, but worry about your own foundation. And the chief cornerstone can do his part. See, we got to change on today. We have to do some things for the Lord. Isaiah was saying, I understand my foundation is not good on today. And so in order for it to be good, I got to start over again. A lot of us don't want to start over, but God is saying, start over. Look at somebody say, start over. So I understand that people have died. I understand that I lost some money. I understand I lost my finances. Just start over. Don't be afraid of it. See, I understand my foundation is not good right now. But I serve somebody who can build me up. Who can form me and shape me. See, Jeremiah, when he went down to the potter's house in chapter 18, he begins to talk about, he said, I saw this potter. He said, I saw that he was building. He had this clay in his hand, but it was marred in his hand. He said every time it was marred, he just started over again. On this wheel, I understand that in life's journey, we're going to have to run into some things where we got to start over. But don't be afraid of it. Just start over. Do your part. Just start over on today, because God can build you into who he wants you to be. So God was telling Isaiah, I don't want you to be a politician, but I want you to be a prophet unto the nation. He said everybody's not going to accept you. Everybody's not going to like it, but just do your own part, and God will give you the increase. I'm about to wrap it up because I know y'all tired on today. I can stand up here for a couple more minutes. Do your part, okay? Bring it on, Doc. You just need to do your part. If you begin to think about it, see, God is not calling for perfect people, because he can he can shape you into who he wants you to be. If I look throughout the Bible, I begin to find an example of people who weren't perfect. The only perfect person they told him was Jesus. If I begin to look from Genesis all the way to Revelation, I begin to find some people who were not perfect.
All right.
I begin to find some people who had some problems with them, who doubted when God wanted to call them. They said, I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing that. I know Moses, when God called him for the burning bush, he said, I got a speech impediment. I got a stuttering problem. I can't do it on today. Even if you go on and said that, he said, don't worry about it. I got a mouthpiece for you already. He said, he was standing right there by you. Your brother. He said, don't even worry about it. It began to go on. There's a lot of people in the Bible that had some problems. David slept with somebody's wife, but God was saying, it's still a man who's chosen after my own heart. Just do your part on today. I imagine David, after he slept with Bathsheba, a lot of people looking at him like, oh, he ain't changed on today, but God just said, do your part, focus on what you need to be focusing on. He said, and then I can provide the increase. So, begin to go to the New Testament. I find Matthew, I found Peter. He sure enough was good bad. He loved cussing everybody out. He loved cussing. He loved cutting people's ear off. He liked to fight, and so there was some problems with him. Go to Paul. He liked killing people, and so God is saying, just do what you can, while you can to do your part. But when you change them today, look, 1 Peter 2:9 tells me, he said, but you're a chosen race of royal priesthood, a holy nation. People for his own possession, he said, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of the darkness into the marvelous light. See, I understand that I was in a dark place at one point in my life. A lot of people in this room, everybody in this room should be raising your hand because you're in a dark place. You ain't always known God, and even when you did know God, you were still messing up. The only thing is that my story is different than your story. See, some people's story were in the bottom of a bottle. Some people's story where they found it in a pipe. Some people's story, they found it in a needle, or they find it. But I understand that when God came into my life, he drove out the darkness that was on the inside of me. He brought it into his marvelous light. All right, I couldn't be the same again because I had to change. But then this fourth point, and then I'm going to sit down, is be willing to go. All right. God did not tell Isaiah what his mission was before until he got finished. He began to ask a question. He asked a question. He didn't tell him. But he began to ask a question, and he said, whom shall I send? And who shall go for us? And then Isaiah said, send me. I raise my hand. I volunteer for it. Send me. I'll go on today. See, what he understood is I can't worry about what everybody else in the nation is going to do because they ain't had an encounter with God. He said, because I had an encounter, I understand, just send me. Send me, Lord. I'll go. See, we are at a critical time in our nation where God is giving us the same choice on today. But it's up to you how you going to answer the call. Somebody may say, well, that mission ain't built for me, so I'm going to go ahead and step out of the life. But then may be somebody who just raised their hand and say, Lord, just send me. All right. I'll go see it. He commissioned Isaiah on today, and then he begins to tell him what he was going to face. He said, everybody ain't going to like you. Everybody's not going to listen to you. So that sounds like an oxymoron on today. That sounds like it's contradicting itself. See, how can you give me a mission, but everybody's not going to like me? Everybody's not going to listen to me. It's not going to be successful, but see, success is not based on your failure. Sometimes you're going to fail, but that doesn't mean that it was not a success because God's still going to get the glory somehow.
That's it. Yes.
See, a lot of people are looking for people to just run to the altar and be saved, looking for people to immediately get on the battlefield with you, but it's not going to happen that way. I'm sorry, life ain't a movie. It's not going to happen that way. People going to talk about you. They're going to stab you in the back. They're going to persecute you. They're going to abuse you. They're going to do a lot of different things. But it's still up to you to do your part. I can't worry about how they're going to accept me. I can't worry about what people are going to say about me, but I can do my part. And when I do my part, I know that the Lord will be satisfied because it's not up to me, but it's up for him. So here it is on today. He begins to ask. He said, I want to volunteer on today. A volunteer who's going to be willing. That's all God is asking for. That's all your organization is asking for. They want somebody that's willing and able to do your part. So he begins to say it in two parts. Here am I, send me. So what was he saying? He said, I'm available. Not only am I available, he said, but you can do with me what you want to do with me.
All right.
God is looking for some people who are going to be submissive on today. If people want to argue with him and tell him what mission they want to go on and what they want to do, you want to tell people what you're going to do. But God is just saying, I'm looking for some willing people. Some people who I can mold and people I can shape to do my mission on today. See, we're facing a critical time here in the United States. See, I can't talk about the country, but I can talk about here in the United States. Right. We're facing a time here, even in our communities. You go back to a community, you find your community is broken. You find some things that's messed up, that's tore up from the floor up like Paul did in Corinth. But he was just telling each of them, do your part. Do what you can. Don't worry about what your neighbor is doing. Don't worry about what your members are doing, but you do what you can.
All right.
To upbuild the kingdom. See, we're builders in this field. We're laboring. And you may not see it here on today. You may not get it tomorrow. You may not even get it years from now. But after a while, I heard Al Sharpton say, I'm going to exchange my cross for a crown. See, there's a counter I'm trying to get to, exchange counter one day. That sits high up in glory. That when people have talked about me down here, and I didn't get congratulations, I didn't get new cars and houses down here, but in glory. There's a exchange counter I can go to. That's just exchanging my cross for a crown. See, Jesus told me that in order to follow him, he said, you got to forsake yourself. He said, pick up your cross and follow me. See, he didn't tell me that on the road it was going to be easy, but he did say, do your part.
That's right.
And follow me on today. He said, he didn't tell me that everything was going to be easy and it was going to be a bed of roses. People were going to give me money, but he said, do your part. Don't worry about the rest, because one day, there's a greater reward for you. I'm just charging somebody on today that where you at now, you can't be stagnant. Where you at now, you can't be content with the status quo where you at now. You can't stay there.
I know.
But you got to be able and be willing to do your part. To change and to do what God has called for you to do. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, do your part.
All right.
Done on today.